to acquisition versus exhibition. And welcome to Indie Talk, part of the 17th annual Indie Memphis Film Festival. Conversations, once again, are free and open to the public, thanks to the Hohenberg Foundation. Thanks to Fuel Film for helping orchestrate some of this stuff. None of this would have been possible without the generous support of Duncan Williams. So please turn your phones on vibrate, keep them on, because we want you to tweet and text and Facebook, and use hashtag IndieMemphis to tell your friends about it. And we have a great panel moderated by our own John Beifuss, and I'll just leave it with him to introduce the other folks.
Hey y'all, can you hear me? Do I need to talk into this microphone better, or is this okay? Is this good? Okay. Well, I'm John Beifuss. If you're from Memphis, I would hope that you know, although I find I can't really take that for granted, that I write for the Commercial Appeal, which I also hope you would know is the daily newspaper in Memphis. I don't know if I can take that for granted anymore either, but I've been doing this movie, I've been working there forever, been doing this movie gig for like some 16, 17 years or something, a really long time also. And we're here, I didn't realize until Matt just introduced us, or it didn't crack my conch, that the name of this panel is, what do they call it, acquisition versus exhibition, which kind of has a confrontational or a battle aspect to it, but I don't think that's really going to be the case as we discuss it. And over here we've got Jeff Kaufman, who is Executive Senior Vice President.
Senior Vice President of Film and Marketing for Malco Theaters. I've worked for Malco for 17 years. Primarily I program all of their theaters, everywhere, every screen, every week. I'm also in charge of all studio relations, marketing. Previously I've worked for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in distribution from 85 to 97. I had my own company in sub-distribution from 80 to 85, and prior to that, I worked for Universal. So I've been in the movie business all my life.
And to my left is Dan Guando. Is that pronouncing that correct?
That's right, yeah.
And I think your title used to be a little different, but now it's Executive Vice President of Acquisitions.
They promoted me when they found out I was speaking at the Memphis Film Festival. So
Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm the Executive Vice President of Acquisitions at the Weinstein Acquisitions and Production at the Weinstein Company. Though my focus is I run the acquisitions department. I've been at the company for 10 years. I, along with my team, am responsible for, say, about 75% of the Weinstein Company's slate. That's across all 3 of our labels and all the films that we acquire, both at film festival stage or at an earlier script stage. I'm also in charge of all domestic festival programming. So I've programmed films here at Indie Memphis for the last few years, which is why I'm down here this year. And it's the only place I've worked. I was an intern at Miramax. I worked at Miramax Films and made the transition over with Harvey to the Weinstein Company in 2005, or 2006. So just passed my 10-year anniversary a few months ago. So it's where all the hair went. I don't know where Jeff's went. Mine went down the drain. Yeah, both Harvey is the answer for both of our baldness.
So how many, I'll start it off, how many Oscar winners have you bought?
That's a great question. Let's see.
Thank
I
you.
bought, yeah, well done, Jeff. We don't
Come on,
know
Jeff.
where you
Yeah, I'm good there.
Let's see. I bought The Artist. I bought across any. The only Best Picture that I've acquired is The Artist. I didn't really have anything to do with King's Speech. Let's see. I was a bit involved in 20 Feet from Stardom, and I've worked. The highlights, which are all here in the program. In fact, maybe I should just read them. I acquired last year Fruitvale Station, Philomena, and Mandela were and The Grandmaster, the Wong Kar-wai film, which was shortlisted for the Oscars, were my 4 major acquisitions. This year I acquired The Imitation Game, which is playing tonight at 9:30 if you haven't seen it here at the festival, and that will hopefully add to my list of 2 acquisitions of Best Picture winners, as my wife takes flash photography of me doing that.
When you saw The Artist was such an outlier and such a different piece of material.
Yeah.
Did you have any indication other than the quality of the film, that it could go
I
on to the
will,
best
I will be
picture?
the first to give myself credit when it's due. This particular case, I was in a private screening room with Harvey in Paris in March of 2011, I think was the year that we acquired that film. Is that right? I think that's right. About a month and a half before its premiere in Cannes. All I knew was it was the black and white silent movie. We had been told by the producers that it was amazing, as every producer of every film in the history of film was told, a distribution executive. And we sat down in this theater. My boss is amazing but easily distracted. It was the first screening. I saw him on the edge of his seat from the first frame through the end of the film. We walked out of the theater. We thanked everyone that had organized it for us. We sat down and we got in the car to drive away. We had just come, by the way, we had been in Hong Kong for one day where we acquired a martial arts thriller called Wuxia. It's released under the name Dragon here in the US. We flew to Paris for one day for this screening. And we got in the car after the screening, and he turned to me and asked me my thoughts on the movie. And I said, unique, charming, wonderful, the performances, everything about it I was absolutely in love with. But do you think this is going to work in a broader sense in the US? We had already built most of our slate for the year, and I had been told by the rest of our company, when you go on this trip with Harvey, do not buy some movie that we don't know what to do with. So I go and I see this black and white silent movie with no stars, and John Goodman's the only face you can recognize in it, Penelope Ann Miller, and I said, is this the one that you want to put all of this time, money, resources into? Because this is going to take, I have the easy job. I say yes or no to films. It's our distribution, publicity, and marketing team that has to make them work. It's you who has to get people to come into the theater to see them as well. So I said, is this really the one we're going to have everyone work on this year? And he said, turned to me, this is 5 minutes after the movie ended. He said, I agree with everything you just said. It's winning Best Picture this year and we're buying it tonight.
Well,
And we closed the film that night, and then he made me call his brother and say, we bought a black and white silent film in Paris tonight. And it goes on to win Best Picture and all the other nominations. So.
From our side, we have the Ridgeway Theater that we've put a lot of money, time, and effort into, and turned it into what I think is a beautiful theater and a wonderful place to see that kind of film. But because we only have 4 screens, when it comes to peak exhibition times like Thanksgiving and Christmas, one of those 4 screens is, each one of those 4 screens is important. So you've got to really pick the best one, or what you think is going to be the best one, or you're going to be, it's like a retail store or a dry goods store that doesn't have pads to sell.
Yeah.
So I see the movie.
Where did you see it?
I saw it at the trade screen at the Ridgeway.
Okay.
And I had to go into Steve, one of our owners, and said, well, I think we're going to be playing a black and white silent film for Christmas. And it was like, that's what I heard. Obviously it worked out, but it's one of those things where it's daunting. It's a leap of faith for us. It's a leap of faith for you.
Leap of faith for us too, yeah.
Well, Dan, so as Executive Vice President of Acquisitions, how many films does the Weinstein Company acquire, say in a year's slate or whatever? And are you overseeing a team that, you tell us a little bit about the 3 labels, and how many films, and how you break it down, like we have a certain number that we're going to push into theaters, we have some that are going to be more like VOD and things.
So I'll reorder those questions. So we have 3 labels of the company. The Weinstein Company, which sort of is the parent label of all of them, but is specifically here for my job, the Harvey side of the company. There's Dimension Films, which you probably know from the genre films like Scream and Sin City and scary movie franchises. That's Bob, Harvey's brother. And then for the last 3 years, we've had a label called Radius, Radius TWC, which does our multi-platform, which makes the hair on Jeff's arm stand up, multi-platform distribution, which is our day and date, meaning it's released on VOD or in theaters simultaneously, sometimes VOD first, and then theaters in the second window, and sometimes just straight to VOD. So those are the 3 labels. I acquire specifically for Harvey and the Weinstein Company side of the slate, though by nature of my job and the amount of access and travel that I do to the film festivals, I am looking for films for all 3 labels and have been involved in probably 30 to 40% of the releases that Radius has put out in their 3 years. To answer your mandate question, I think I calculated last year, I see a decent amount, over 1,000 movies a year between my travel to film festivals.
This is more than we do.
Yeah. Every film festival, I try to pride myself in seeing almost every film that plays at that festival. So I saw 115 films or 112 films in Sundance this year. I saw 150 or 160 of the titles in Toronto this year. I saw every film that played South by Southwest, at least in the feature side.
10% of the ones are the ones that you're...
But this was about to be my point. Yeah, that's more because of the due diligence one has to do at a company like mine, where we have 3 labels. We have no mandate in terms of genre, budget, language, filmmaker experience, anything. So in the span of, actually the Artist Week or the Artist Era is a good example. In the span of 3 weeks, I acquired Wuxia, a martial arts thriller in, I think it's in Mandarin, in Hong Kong. The next day I flew and bought a black and white silent movie with French stars called The Artist in Paris. Then a few weeks later, we acquired The Iron Lady, British period pick. I bought a French language horror film called Livid, and we bought Lawless, the John Hillcoat film with Guy Pearce and Tom Hardy and Jessica Chastain, Prohibition era thriller. That's in the span of a week and a half. So I have to see everything because we're the type of company with these 3 labels that could conceivably release anything.
Now, the French horror film that you bought, did you buy to keep it out of the marketplace and remake it into English?
It's funny you say that because we also bought the remake rights simultaneously, but they were French filmmakers we had worked with previously on a French language horror film called The Inside that had done quite well for us on home video, so we just wanted to be associated with their next film.
Well, it's interesting, in next week on November 7th, you should be proud of Malco Theaters because we're bringing in Citizen 4 and Keep on
Radius,
Keeping On.
and I bought Keep on Keeping On.
Well,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
Which
Now-
played here this weekend.
Yeah, neither of those, I understand that they're through Radius, but neither of those are VODs.
Neither of those are VOD, so this is why.
So it's confusing to
Yeah.
us to kind of, quantify what
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 constitutes
works, what
Weinstein or
doesn't.
Harvey or
Well, not
Radius
only that,
boards
what
in
what
general.
works and what doesn't. I mean,
Right.
does the fact that we had Arbitrage or Snowpiercer, you bought Snowpiercer?
I acquired Snowpiercer, yeah.
So Snowpiercer was probably one of the largest, or the highest grossing VOD theatrical releases
Ever.
ever. But not all of them are like that.
Right.
And some of them don't even come close.
Right.
So it's hard for us, as an end user, and you guys as a consumer, to know what you're getting.
Right.
It's a tough one.
And
Yeah.
when even people using the term VOD, probably everyone in here knows, but in case you don't, it means video on demand, where you can access it on your television for
Netflix,
pay per
iTunes,
view.
or cable. And
I didn't.
Is that a red flag for you then? I mean, if you know that it's going to be simultaneous, does that give you pause?
Absolutely, and there are several different reasons. Number one, Malco Theaters has probably the most liberal policy when it comes to playing dual platform releases like VODs. We believe in offering all of our customers the broadest palette that we possibly can offer within good business sense. So we don't take a real hard stance in saying that we're not going to play something in VOD. We also believe that the primacy of theatrical exhibition, using theaters as the prime driver for software, is obviously in our best interest. We're a single-use location. We're just movies. That's all we do. When the Weinstein Company has a library of 700 or whatever you all have now, those films are available to them to monetize in perpetuity, whether it's ships at sea or airlines or VOD or DVD, anything. So we try and take a very liberal, very broad look at what we can bring in, what's good to bring in, and what's not going to hurt us with regard to privacy of theatrical exhibition, and that's really the windows argument. The distance in time between the theatrical release and the release in VOD and the downstream other releasing. But there are other companies that, like Regal Theaters, takes a hard view. They will not play anything that's VOD, period, end of story. Anything that's on DVD, they're not going to do it. Obviously, with 4,800 screens, politically, they can't, it's very difficult for them to say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do that, and then not have the market move. So Malco's in a very envious position where we can make that choice, where we can experiment, if you will, a little bit with the windows and with playing, you know, as broad a palette as we can.
Well, I find anecdotally, and maybe y'all can tell me if you think this is true or not, I find just in talking to people that there's so many options out there now that they don't really know. Like if Malco books the Skeleton Twins into the Ridgeway, they don't, the regular people don't know. They see it's there. They don't know that it's also on demand. Like their brain doesn't necessarily tell them to look and see if they can find it. They might find it accidentally and watch it,
Right.
and then not go to the theater. But I don't know if just the people I talk to don't seem that aware of that, even though they're like a little more.
That's an option.
That sometimes that's the case. They know it because they read stories about it, but with specific titles, like I don't know. No one ever tells me or ever asks me even, is that movie on VOD, you know,
Right.
or something.
But Dan, do you see where when you have a VOD title and it's released theatrically, do you wait for a certain click-through, a certain number? Is there a...
You mean if we're opening something VOD first
Right.
and then theatrical in the second window?
Right.
No, those are usually set in advance, and that's more of a practical decision based on the title. That you know, for certain titles, the P&A spend, which is the print and advertising, what you would just call your marketing spend for awareness and publicity, is so much lower on something that's premiering on VOD than on your traditional theatrical release. Because you're not, when you're releasing a film in its first window or permanently on VOD, going to advertise it in the most expensive traditional ways, i.e. taking out newspaper ads, taking out TV ads, things that are costing a significant amount more money than advertising online. So what we're usually doing in those instances are finding films that have the merit or the audience to find a theatrical audience, but are probably primarily more of a VOD type release, and releasing those in the first window on VOD, because that money that we're spending in P&A to promote the VOD release ends up building the awareness 4 weeks later for the theatrical release. So in a way, it's kind of an end around to getting to a theatrical release in a cheaper way, knowing that the driving business and force behind it will end up being the video on demand.
So Radius will have films that they release in VOD first.
They did it
theatrical
with their
second.
most successful film, even more, sorry to cut you off, even more successful than Snowpiercer, was their first release ever. It's called Bachelorette, a female-driven comedy with Kirsten Dunst and Isla Fisher in the summer of 2012. And that was VOD first for 6 weeks before it went theatrical. And it did, I think it was $7 or $8 million on VOD, which is still the standard bearer for a VOD release. That's not a studio film, obviously. You know, I do work at a company where, and I personally am still a devout believer in, as you just said beautifully, the primacy of the theatrical window. I don't have any interest in working on films that don't have some sort of theatrical component to it, because that's why I fell in love with what I do in the first place. But to me, maybe the slight difference is my job is getting people to see the films that I choose. And for me, maybe they're not all equal in my heart, but a screen is a screen. And if I can get someone to see it on VOD, or someone to buy the home video, or someone to go see it in the theater, might not all make the same amount of money for me, but it's the same level of exposure for me. So that's where, you know,
Eyeballs are eyeballs.
Eyeballs are eyeballs. I know this isn't the point of the conversation, but just to clarify something on the Radius part of the conversation, they actually, and we were talking about this a little earlier, while they're known maybe for being a VOD-driven company, they actually had the longest running theatrical film in 2013, 20 Feet from Stardom, which won the Oscar last year for Best Documentary. Citizen4 is their film, which is going out in a clean theatrical window. They have plenty of films. Keep On Keeping On is going out in a clean theatrical window. So they, I think, more so than some of these other multi-platform companies like Magnolia and IFC and some of the other companies that are driven truly by VOD, are film-specific release patterns. I think each film sort of, it's the easy answer, but each film kind of dictates the way it should be released.
Well, let me get off that for a second. Since everyone in here, they probably mostly go to see theatrical movies at Malco theaters, not necessarily exclusively, but probably more or less. Could you say something about, I mean, we mentioned your fancy title, but people might call you normally, among other things, the film booker, and you book the films at Malco exhibits or shows. Could you tell us something about the magnitude of that job in terms of how many theaters Malco has now, how many screens you're booking every week? And can you say, like off the top of your head, do you know more or less how many different movies are like today playing in Memphis theaters? More or less, you know?
Not even.
Not
Well,
even.
we have 33 locations, we have over 340 screens. 33 locations in towns as separate as Memphis or Sikeston, Missouri, or Owensboro, Kentucky, Northwest Arkansas with Fayetteville, Fort Smith, Van Buren, Springdale, 2 theaters in Rogers. So we have theaters all over the Mid-South. We're primarily, geographically, that's where we are. So basically my job is on Monday. What I do is I look at all the grosses, basically Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the weekend grosses, for every single theater, every single screen, every single film. And you kind of go through a jigsaw puzzle. You say, okay, well, a great example is this week. We have this coming Friday, November 7th, you have Christopher Nolan's Interstellar opening, and you have Disney Animation, who brought a little picture out last year called Frozen, their next picture called Big Hero 6. Now, Big Hero 6 is Marvel's first animated story, done by the people that brought you Frozen. So, and it also is the time between the fall releases and the very first week of the holiday releases. So this is the time of year for Malco Theater, for any theater company. Obviously, we are at the beck and call of distribution and acquisition and production. All we are is retail. So this weekend, you know, you've got a major science, it's not science fantasy, it is science fiction from a major Hollywood director, and it runs almost 3 hours long. Well, you know, you're looking at that and you're going, okay, well, how many prints am I going to have to put to successfully make sure that we don't have lines? Because we have trained all you people, every single one of you, to, how many of you guys went to the movies when you stood in line and it sold out and you couldn't buy a ticket? Because I know I did. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. And digital exhibition has made it even easier for us to program our theaters to accommodate any capacities. Okay, so, you know, Hunger Games is coming out on the 21st. On the 20th, we'll have the pre-opening, right? We'll have locations that will sell 100% of their seats. Every seat in the theater. All those little girls and the women and the guys will go see it first night, because that's what they're trained to do. That's what they do. They go see all these movies. Now, the older an audience is, the older a demographic is, that tends to drift off into second, third, and fourth week. But anyway, this week, so you have a 3-hour science fiction movie. You have an animated feature from Disney that also has a 3D component. So you have to kind of look at it and plan how many screens, show times, what you're coming off of. When the distributor calls you back and say, well, look, you know, I don't want to come off of Maze Runner. It did, you know, $1,800, and you know, you're holding before whatever that awful freestyle movie, you're holding that at $1,900, or if that's in its first, or $1,700. So it's all negotiation. You have to, you know, make sure that your distributor partners are happy, because they're the ones that are going to keep you in business. So every single Monday, I'll go through every single theater, every single screen. We will put the puzzle together. You have to make sure that you're on sale, all your tickets by Wednesday, if not earlier. And key management, because all of your digital content is locked, and you can only open with keys. So yeah, it's big, you know, and it's all done on one day. It's all done on Monday.
And can you say something about how you, for instance, you mentioned the Hunger Games. You'll take that on as probably more or less as many screens as they'll give you the digital. You mentioned the word prints, but it'll be
Right.
digital cinema packages is
Right.
the new physical entity that
It's a hard drive.
that projects
Right.
the film. But at the same time, we mentioned this movie Keep On Keeping On, which is a documentary about the jazz musician Clark Terry. Now, obviously, that is, you hope some people go to see it, but you really don't know.
Well,
So
listen to this. On the same day that we're releasing Christopher Nolan's huge Interstellar, and you know the next picture from the people that gave us Frozen, we're also releasing Citizen 4, a documentary about Edward Snowden. We're also releasing Keep On Keeping On, a jazz documentary. We're going to release a movie called Laggies from A24, which is
Lynn Shelton.
yeah. And we're also going to release A Tale of Princess Kaguya, which is a Japanese anime, and it's been doing great. So again, you know, what we're trying to do is bring a very broad palette, but we have, you know, if I was in distribution and I'm looking at first choice, second choice, third choice, you know, I know that, you know, Laggies and Princess, I mean, they're going to have a tough time. You know, your pictures are going to have a tough time.
Yeah.
Because the first choice of anybody is going to be Interstellar, and then the second choice is going to take their kids to go see Big Hero 6.
Right.
And then, if they have a third film they want to go see, maybe they'll go see the Edward Snowden film,
Right.
or Princess Kaguya.
Right.
I mean, it's a very crowded marketplace. And the way that happens is, you know, I don't get to call up and say, okay, you know, I'm ready to play Citizen 4. What happens is Alyssa Fedorov, one of his beautiful Confederates, will call me and say, look, we released Citizen 4 in LA, New York, Chicago 2 weeks ago, and so, you know, we need to get Memphis in. This is on November 7th. So just by happenstance and the availability made to us by distribution, we have a situation where we have, you know, 6 movies opening in the Memphis market when, so it's just a lot.
Right.
That's
Maybe
a
you
lot.
can't sustain that.
Right, and there'll be a lot of yeah, it's very tough.
Right.
So I always think that sometimes when I get the list of the movies y'all are opening, that there's, in addition, that there's, like you mentioned, relationships, that there's a lot of films you might book, even though you know it's not, to say it won't draw anyone is an exaggeration, but it'll basically draw no customers. But you're sort of doing that to help to maintain a relationship and to present an ideal of Malco as a full-service operation that provides a wide variety of choices.
Well, we also, remember, we also have a 4-screen and a 5-screen theater, a Ridgeway and a studio,
Right.
that we want to continue to offer eclectic, different offerings to the city of Memphis. And it just happened to be that with the festival being at the Ridgeway, taking up 3 screens over a weekend, it hamstrings me in programming that theater because I can't open anything on the 31st. I can't open anything, so I couldn't open Birdman there even if I wanted to, which opens on the 31st. And if you haven't seen it, you need to go see it. It's currently playing at the Ridgeway on 2 screens for your pleasure.
I didn't buy it, but it's amazing.
And I couldn't really open, the only thing I could open on the 24th was St. Vincent, which is one of your titles. And so, another great movie. But again, that's a situation where you look at what's available, and you have Ouija, you have all these horror movies out there. So you say, well, okay, well, I want to open St. Vincent, not at the Paradiso, but at the Ridgeway and the studio. So those are also decisions that we make to try and package things in a way that's going to maximize our ability to be commercially successful and to give the platform to the movies that are appropriate. But the interesting thing is that because the festival is it's taking up 3 screens at the studio on the 31st, it just made the 7th open, to
Right.
program.
Right.
So
And there's the give and take on just the political level of, if one of our titles isn't particularly performing well and we want you to keep it there rather than ship it off to put something else in there, well, we can hang over your head. This isn't me. We can hang over your head. You want Inglourious Basterds this year, or you want?
Eric would never do that.
You want, but it is part of the give and take, no? That
Yeah.
you need to keep a film that might be underperforming to maintain the relationship. with
Absolutely,
certain
we do that.
studios.
We do that all the time,
Yeah.
and it's funny because in our business, to me, I look at it as analogous to the sports business. Once you're a manager, or once you're in, then you're in. If you're not a second base coach, then maybe you're managing. Maybe next year you're a scout. Well, Alyssa, I've known from her time at Magnolia,
Right.
and now she's working at Weinstein Radius. The president of Dan's distribution company, Eric Lomas, was the president of MGM during the time that I was a division manager at MGM in Dallas. So, everybody knows everybody, and it's nothing to get a call from someone like Eric. When you were releasing the Tom Cruise, God, you had something at Christmas time.
Jack Reacher? That wasn't one
No,
there.
it was a Weinstein movie. Anyway, I got a call from, I didn't particularly want to play it, but I got a call from Eric, and he goes, "Remember who your friends are."
It's like Boardwalk Empire.
And he was exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean,
And so Dan, the Weinstein Company has a reputation of really, like the artist being a pivotal example of taking something and having a talent for pushing it and making, in that case, to the ultimate pinnacle of that million Oscars and all that. How much is there a pressure in your job, like from, if I can say his name, if I know him, Harvey, to like that he wants something, at least a couple of titles every year, like you gotta, like maybe is there a point in the year when he says you gotta find me an Iron Lady or something?
Yeah, and as the months tick by and the festivals tick by, that pressure obviously builds if we don't think we have it already. Yeah, we don't go into a year with a mandate for a certain number of titles. I don't have a budget when I go to a film festival. I can only spend X amount on a movie. The one great thing about working for Harvey is if there's a movie we want, I cannot think of one example of a film that we didn't get that we wanted, because we usually will figure out a way to get it. There are plenty of films that I've missed or that I've passed on, that I've made mistakes on. That's not the subject of this panel, please. It's being recorded. But there are very few examples of films that we haven't gotten that we wanted to get. But yes, there's a certain pressure. I mean, there's a reputation at stake for our company that we will always be a part of the awards conversation. We're not the kind of company that are going to release big tentpole films. We have a few outliers every year, some of them extremely successful, the Quentin Tarantino films being the best example, that do bridge onto the awards side a bit, but are mostly our biggest commercial plays. But we always have a film. We had The Giver this summer, which is not something you'd associate with Harvey usually. A young adult, dystopic future kind of.
Pre-sold, there's a book.
Based on the Lois Lowry book, of course. So that's not what you always associate Harvey with. What you associate Harvey and our company with are end of the year kinds of films, awards films. And yes, that's what I've lost hair and sleep and blood, sweat, and tears over, is finding those, which is why you'll see we have such an eclectic slate. We don't release a lot from January to August. We release a lot from September through December, because we're trying to figure out, we are very good at finding awards movies and putting them out there. We are not the ones that end up deciding which ones work and which ones don't. The audiences do. And so we kind of hedge our bets a bit. Like last year, we had, it was probably our sort of widest spread of films that we released in terms of awards material. We had Philomena, August Osage County, Mandela, The Butler, and Fruitvale Station were our 5 awards contenders, I guess you could say, last year. None of them went all the way, but you go into a season not knowing which one's going to work. I don't know that we would have said Philomena is going to be. No one from my company, even Eric, comes out saying The Butler is going to gross $116 million. No one comes out and says, Jeff did. Nobody comes out and says And I'm talking about when we first see them in February, not when we're releasing the theaters. Nobody says Philomena is gonna be maybe the best reviewed and most beloved film out of that slate of 5 films. You don't know, which is why you see us acquire, I'll go back 3 questions and answer how many we acquire now. I acquire somewhere between 10 and 15 films a year for the Harvey side of the label. We probably as a company acquire 30 to 40 films a year. That includes all the things that Radius is doing with that VOD component we discussed. So of those 10 to 15, we know some are going to be small and maybe little engines that could, a Fruitvale Station, this year a Disappearance of Eleanor Rigby, something that might have some traction with critics that we hope catches on with an audience. And then we take our big bets. This year it's The Imitation Game with Benedict Cumberbatch and Keira Knightley. Last year it was Mandela and Philomena. And we mixed that in with the other side, and August House County, which was actually a production, so it wasn't really my side of the company. And we mixed that in with the films that we're producing as well.
So do you think the expansion of this floating 5 to 10 Best Picture, is that a good thing, in your opinion? I mean, obviously it gives more opportunity to film.
It certainly helped us with our releases and our ability to get the kind of attention. I think, and maybe this is sacrilegious for somebody who works at the Weinstein Company to say, but I think the attention that's given to the awards worthiness of a film is antithetical to the reason why they're made in the first place, or should be made in the first place, the reason why I fell in love with them in the first place. But from a business perspective, having that awards attention and ultimately awards themselves do make a tangible difference in the amount of people that see the films, the amount of money that we make, the amount of money that the filmmakers make.
And the amount of money that we make.
And the amount of money that you make. And a nomination and a win, it's not just some sort of hypothetical thing, I bet that's good for the movie. It is a genuinely great thing for the success of the movie to have that kind of attention. So
you ought to do that with the primary actor, director.
I was just going to say, there's been talk about expanding the number of actors and actresses to 10 rather than the 5.
Certainly, if you read the blogs over the last couple of months, I mean, there's great performances this year. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And there are going to be people that are left out that maybe shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then if they expand to 10 and people are still just gonna bitch that there's
Yeah,
still gonna be another 10 that
Yeah,
didn't get in. And
Yeah.
well, maybe I think it's already almost 5:15. Y'all wanna take some questions?
Sure.
Do that? That would, people like to ask questions, I think, so. Steve?
Do you ever get annoyed, or do you ever express that annoyance, if you do, to Jeff if they're doing things like they're doing now, giving over a number of screens to local festivals? Does that ever affect your end of the business?
It doesn't affect. Let me give you the upfront answer to this, which is that I don't deal with the day-to-day exhibition issues of the company. That's Eric, who we were just discussing. So Jeff and I have just met today. I don't interact with the theaters directly. But I can
add piece in the middle here.
Yeah, exactly. I can answer more generally that the amount of business for the types of films that we release that would be lost to a couple of screens for a festival wouldn't affect the kinds of releases that we do.
It doesn't affect him as much as it affects us.
So, sorry, let me just finish real quick. Actually, the festivals, for what I do, because I do both sides of it, the acquisitions and festival programming, I value what festivals bring to our slate more than what it deprives us from maybe a weekend of box office. There's a reason why I'm playing The Imitation Game at Memphis tonight at 9:30. There's a reason why last year we showed, I think, Philomena here and maybe August Osage County as well. There's a reason why I'm playing Imitation Game at 16 or 17 festivals before the release. It's played 10 festivals so far this year from Telluride till now. It's won 8 audience awards. That is worth more to me. He's not going to lose the Imitation Game because of Weekend of Indie Memphis, but Indie Memphis's boost to the release of our films is worth more than we can spend in this market. That publicity, that word of mouth, that seed that we've planted is hopefully going to come back and pay off in a month and a half when it opens here in Memphis.
I will tell you, it's a major commitment by our company, by Malco, to hamstring the ability of that theater to make money for essentially a month. Because you can't book anything prior to the festival because you're not going to be able to hold it through. You have to make sure that you have something to book on the back end of the festival, because if you don't, all you're going to be holding is something that wasn't on screen this week.
Right.
And then you have to, not only is that a problem, but then I have to call up everyone that I'm doing business with, all the studios that have a film that is not gonna be shown Monday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and say, don't look for a gross. You know, you're just not gonna have it. And we have this festival, I have to tell them why. So, and it's a political thing, so you try not to book, St. Vincent's on the 24th, and then call them up and say, well, you're not gonna have a gross on the 31st, because they would have a conniption.
Yeah.
So it's a real commitment by our company to be able to do that and have that. It's a real pain in my ass. But
We greatly appreciate it. We really do. I mean, these festivals are a real lifeblood for the success of most films, especially films from a company like ours that doesn't spend what a Warner Brothers or a Universal is going to spend on their release. This is a vital part of our distribution strategy.
and you don't know what filmmaker is going to come out of festivals
Right.
like this. And they are the lifeblood of our industry, of our industry and
Yeah.
this industry. We can't live without you guys.
Yeah, you'll see, yeah. I mean, some of the films I'm simultaneously here on the narrative feature jury, which is announcing their awards tonight. And the selection here at the festivals, as I told the festival programmers today, some of the best festival programming, especially in the narrative feature competition where I was watching, that I see from any regional festival. Of course, you know, maybe it doesn't have the access to the world premieres that a Telluride, a Cannes, a Toronto, or Sundance has, but there are going to be filmmakers that you'll see if you've seen some of the films here this week, and some of you probably are the filmmakers here this week, that are going to be extremely successful and relevant outside of the walls of Memphis. And that's why in my other hat, the acquisitions hat, I really appreciate coming here, because these are films that I might not have access to at a company of my size, where, you know, if I only acquire 10 to 15 films and I see over 1,000, you can do the math on how many I have to pass on. That doesn't mean I'm not valuing finding these filmmakers that might have a place in our company.
Yeah, it may not be this film,
Right.
it may not be next film, but it may be the one that you make for Warner Brothers in 3 years.
Mhm. Or the Weinstein Company.
Or the Weinstein Company. It's just, you know, a slip of the tongue.
Anybody else? Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I saw the film The Drop that it played, I guess, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
And it only played for 2 weeks, I noticed. I went to see it twice.
I appreciate that.
I just adored that film. I just fell in love right away.
James Gandolfini and
Yes, and Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy.
yeah, Judy and I went to see that.
Yes. I'm curious, a film like that, it's a sort of quiet film, not too many people, I don't think got a lot of press, I don't know. But I'm curious, the choice to keep it for, I've noticed some really great films stay for like 1 week at Studio in the Square, or even at Ridgeway.
Hector and the
Search for Happiness.
Search for Happiness played 1 week at the Ridgeway. Why?
Yes, I
And it was a
saw it.
great movie. I absolutely loved it. Did you see it?
Yeah.
Fabulous movie. No one went to see it. You know, by the time, look, what we do, again, I appreciate it. It's business driven. Once we put it in, you guys have to go see it. If you don't go see it, I can't hold it. A movie theater is at the nexus of art and commerce. Okay? Weinstein, Paramount, they build up libraries, they build up giant sets of assets that they can trade, that they can monetize over the life of 10, 15 years. We don't have that luxury. We're a single-use building. If we bring in something like Hector or something like The Drop, and you guys don't support it, don't go see it, I can't keep it. Now, I may be able to squeeze out a second week on The Drop and see, you know, if it builds, if it catches traction, you know, if John finds it and you know, finds a space and gets the opportunity to write about it. But it's all commerce. Because if the Ridgeway Theater plays The Drop and holds The Drop for 4 weeks in an attempt to make money, have some sort of awareness and do business, well, we're just not going to be there. We can't afford to put the money into a place like the Ridgeway to make it what it is today and hold things. You know, it broke my heart to take off Hector. Absolutely broke my heart, because it absolutely did not deserve that kind of a fate. But I can't hold the gross. I can't hold $1,000 gross. That means maybe 100 people went to see it. that means that over 15 shows, I got 15 people a show. You can't do it. And, you know, I sat in an office once early in my career and I was in distribution, and I said something to this guy, and I learned my lesson. I said, you know, but you have all that popcorn to sell and Coke, and you make, you know, 85% or blah, blah, blah. And he slammed his booking book. I was probably 26 or 27. He slammed his booking book closed. He got up and said, get out of my office. He goes, I don't build candy machines. I don't build a place where you come in and buy popcorn. I build a place where people go to see movies. Now, if you can't give me a movie at the right price, we were arguing over terms. I was working for Universal at the time. Then, you know, I don't build a $15 million candy store.
Yeah.
Just from a lay moviegoer perspective, locally, is the lack of an IMAX theater here a technical or budget or demand one or something else?
Well, actually,
I wish I didn't have to drive to Nashville Tuesday to see 15 per 70 mil projection of Interstellar.
well, Christopher Nolan is one of the few filmmakers that wants us to go back in time and take, you know, we've spent an enormous amount of money converting to digital projection. The Sight and Sound that Malco has is premier in the country. My wife and I go to movies all over the country, and it is absolutely, you know, they're fantastic. We are fantastic. But what you're seeing, you know, if you go see it in 70 millimeter, that's a different story. If you go see it in IMAX, the IMAX that you see now is not like the IMAX that used to be in the Pink Palace Theater, which, by the way, they took the IMAX out. Okay, it is not an enveloping screen. It is not, you know, 40 feet tall. Basically, what it is, and you go to any AMC theater these days, or Cinemark, or Regal that has what's called an IMAX, or a PLF, which is a proprietary large format screen, their version of IMAX. Our theater in Paradiso, either screen 1 or screen 16, is just as good, has better sound, because they only use Sony 5.1, Dolby 5.1 as the IMAX standard. We use 7.1, and we use Atmos. So you'll get a better sight, better sound, just as big screen as you do at any what's called IMAX-like theaters. So there's really no competitive advantage for us to spend the money and the percentage back to IMAX,
Right.
to bring IMAX into a market where we already have screens that are that good.
Yeah, I agree. They're using IMAX kind of like as a marketing.
Yeah, it's a
thing
label.
that you're paying.
Yeah.
And IMAX does, as Jeff just said, you might not realize this, but gets a percentage of that box office the way that a distributor would too. So he's cutting his profits just by having that.
I sat with the IMAX guys 2 years ago, and my ownership brought me in because of the way I feel about what they've done to IMAX, and I said exactly what I said to them, what I said to you, to them. And they weren't very happy, and they bolstered their case for IMAX by talking to me about the proprietary way that they set the seats in the auditorium. And it was like, really? So, I mean, I'm glad that you enjoy it. You know, but you have to drive. I'm sorry about that, but I guarantee you, you go see Interstellar in winter 16, it'll be gorgeous.
Granted, it's a minority situation with a film that's got like 5 different
Right.
IMAX cities, but yeah, I just didn't know my business, and if there was enough demand, obviously the tickets are more premium, pricey, you make more money that way. I didn't know that.
Well, we don't make that much more money because part of that will go to IMAX. So if you have, and you know, a majority of a picture like Interstellar in the first week is going to go back to the studio. So we tend to be. I mean, Malco as a company tends to be very light when it comes to ticket prices, upcharges. We had a conversation, Bobby Levy, one of our owners, and I had a conversation 4 or 5 years ago with Jeffrey Katzenberg. This is during the DreamWorks Animation drive for 3D upcharges. and he was mandating $5 upcharges to go to a 3D movie. So regular ticket price plus $5. And you know, we said, you know, that's not who Malco is, that's not who we are. We don't believe that the value is there for a $15 ticket. So for years, we kept our 3D upcharges, and still we're below national average. So, you know, D-Box, IMAX, the ability to have a $15, $17, $18, $19 ticket for what I believe is limited benefit. Because like I said, we have the best sight and sound in the country, we have great seating, Atmos sound, you can't beat it. You can't see a movie any better than you can see it in a Malco theater. And I don't want to charge you $8 more a ticket.
You actually just brought up something, just a quick tangent, that maybe not everyone here knows. I didn't even really understand until I started working at a company that does it, that when you see a gross on a film, maybe a film does $100 million versus another film that does $100 million, there's not a set standard, it's all within a certain range, but there's not a set standard amount of that goes to the theaters and goes to the distributors. That's all negotiated per studio, per film, so per week.
Per week, yeah.
So, you know, a $100 million film for Paramount doesn't make...
Also what I do.
Right, exactly. A $100 million film that Paramount releases does not bring back to the studio or to the exhibitor the same amount of money that a $100 million film that we release does. Like you just said, Interstellar in its first week will go more to the studio than in subsequent weeks will, I assume. And you know, it's a strange part of the business that a lot of people don't understand. And you just see those raw numbers and assume, well, this movie did X amount of money, of course it was profitable. Well, not necessarily, because you just look at that number, that money's not all going back to the studio.
It also depends on how much it costs to make. I mean, you know, Disney has gotten absolutely vilified for films like John Carter and Mars Needs Moms and Lone Ranger for allowing budgets to exceed the $200 million mark for one film and having grosses in the $60 to $70 million mark. I mean, it's you know, corporate filmmaking at its worst.
And the other side of things, a lot of times you don't, this is the thing that maybe frustrates me the most about box office reporting, is the nuance of what actually is happening, what actually is becoming profitable or not. But the other side of things, you look at an example like Miramax, not the Weinstein Miramax, the other administration of Miramax had No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood in the same year. And both, by any standard, extremely successful Oscar-winning films that did a great amount of box office. The amount of money that they spend in P&A to chase those awards and chase those releases put both of those films in, you know, maybe not that they weren't profitable, but they certainly weren't what they were on the surface.
It's wildly expensive
Yeah.
to chase that stuff.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, could you explain the process of, once you could select the film in the film festival, what's the process from the film festival to the big screen?
Sure. So for the most part, I'm acquiring finished films. I'll come to a place like Sundance or Cannes, see a finished film. That's when maybe the fun part starts, I guess, which is usually the overnight negotiation or multi-night negotiation to buy the rights to that film. I'm almost always competing against another distributor trying to get the rights to those films, which is why it tends to end up being more expensive than it should be. Once we've acquired them, if it's a finished film, if it's something I'm seeing in Sundance, it's done, it's not getting a frame changed. Fruitvale Station I'll use as an example last year. A film I acquired at Sundance, the only thing we changed was we added the word station to the end of the title. It was previously called Fruitvale. Then I put on my other hat, which is my festival programming hat, and along with our distribution team, our publicity team, and our marketing team, the first thing we try to figure out is what time of year is this the right release time of year for? Is this an awards film? If so, you almost have to release it September, October, November, December. If it's not an awards film and you're going to chase money, then you find an open weekend or weeks, ideally, in the spring or in the summer, or if it's a much bigger film in the fall. And we work backwards from there. So for Fruitvale, we decided it might get a little, as amazing a film it is, it might get lost a little bit in the crush of the 60 awards films that get released in the fall. So let's be the adult art house alternative that can get some attention in the summer. And there were some examples of success with that release pattern. So we decided to go in July with that film. It's by maybe Harvey's Deal with the Devil or something, that the weekend we released it was also the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman verdict. So the ties between the themes of Fruitvale Station and the real life case that were going on kind of landed literally within 24 hours of each other and helped us with the release of the film. But we chose that weekend and then we worked backwards. So we acquired that film in January and we say, okay, we're gonna release it in July. What can we do between now and July? We're gonna get the film into the Cannes Film Festival, which we did, which gives it that seal of approval for cinephiles and that international exposure. We played it at maybe 15 or 20 other film festivals. We wouldn't have played it in Memphis, unfortunately, because this is an October-November film festival, but played in every spring festival to start planting seeds around the country. And then, you sort of work backwards and decide how early do we start putting trailers out there? How early do we start putting TV spots on there? Who is the audience for this film? If it's an older audience, like a film like Philomena, you're going to be trailering on older films. You're going to be spending heavily on newspaper ads where there's an older demographic reading them than younger. If you're doing a film like Fruitvale, we spent more money online than we spent in print because the ideal audience was a younger demographic. And then we talk to other studios and decide, okay, even if it's not our own films, we want this trailer playing on every prestige film or adult film that's playing March, April, May, and June, so that we're building awareness for our July release. On other films that aren't quite finished, or films that we or the filmmakers or both decide need some more work, which is also part of my job, we'll acquire a film and then really sit with it and decide not only when do we need to release it, but what needs to happen with this film before it's got the widest appeal. And we don't have enough time to talk about all the nuances of this, but what that often requires is doing what's called test screenings or preview screenings. You may have experienced some of that here in Memphis. It happens in a lot of markets, particularly in New York and LA, but you may have walked by a theater at some point and someone said, do you want a free ticket to see a movie this weekend? Usually that's a studio showing it to a regular audience, i.e. not a festival audience, like a really well-educated, film-educated audience. And seeing how it plays with the general audience, and you get your scores back at the end of it, and you say, "Wow,
It's a metric.
it's a metric." You get a full report. It's kind of horrifying for a filmmaker to see. It's broken down by age, by race, by level of education, by number of films you've seen in the last 6 months, by everything.
Top 2 boxes.
You rate it excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor. Definitely recommend, probably won't, or definitely won't. And you get a 30-page report at the end of it that says, compared to other films that are like this, these are how your performance is scored, this is how the film is scored. And we do that with everything, with films that we've acquired, with films that we produce. Sometimes it means we don't make any changes, sometimes it means we spend a year re-editing the movie.
Every studio does it.
But that's a vital part of the process, because the most important question the filmmaker should be asking themselves, and certainly the most important question that I ask myself when I buy something, is who is the audience? And when I buy something at a film festival, I'm in a little bit of a bubble. You're seeing a film with what I call festival fever, often with the family and friends of the filmmakers in the audience, certainly with people who are excited to be the first audience in the country or in that city to see it. You get a little bit of an inflated response. It's important to take that outside of that atmosphere and figure out, are people really going to respond to a black and white silent movie, or to a tough urban drama, or whatever it is? And if not, what is it that we can afford to do right now to broaden the appeal of it, because we've just spent money to buy it?
All right, we got time for one more, so we'll let you.
I just have a question about film festivals. So how is Toronto's decision to sort of step on Telluride, how did that affect you guys' business model, or did it at all?
I like that controversy has made it all the way to Memphis. I like that.
Oh, I'm from Tuscaloosa.
Okay. For anyone who here doesn't know what that controversy is, the Telluride Film Festival and Toronto Film Festival happened almost simultaneously, and for years have worked pretty much hand in hand in terms of what one plays and the other plays. Telluride doesn't announce their lineup in advance. You only find out the day that the festival starts. So technically, if Toronto had a world premiere on a film, Telluride could play it a few days beforehand and call it a sneak preview or a surprise screening, and Toronto would just sort of turn a blind eye and let it happen. And that would be sort of the US premiere until Toronto would be the Canadian or the international premiere. Toronto took a very firm stance this year that anything that played Telluride, their firm stance was anything that premiered in North America before Toronto would not be played in the first half of the film festival, which is one of the most prestigious and attractive slots are, which was a very not veiled shot at Telluride. It's the only festival that would have stolen that thunder. How has that affected our strategy? It's sort of to be determined. There's only been one round now, and every studio took a different track. I can only speak to my experience because I genuinely love both film festivals for different reasons. We world premiered The Imitation Game in Telluride because we found great success with our other Best Picture hopefuls playing there first. We world premiered, where we North American premiered The Artist there. We world premiered The King's Speech there.
Where's your commitment to the festival?
That's right. It's a festival that, I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg, but films that have, Telluride has premiered 5 of the last 6 Best Picture winners, including Argo and 12 Years a Slave and The King's Speech and The Artist. So there was no reason to break that model, I guess, for a film like The Imitation Game that we think is on the same track. On the other side of things, a film like St. Vincent, the Bill Murray film, was invited to Telluride, but we decided that the commercial exposure and the audience exposure that comes from playing Toronto, which is totally different type of feel for a film festival. Telluride is a couple of thousand people in the mountains in Colorado. Toronto is tens of thousands of people in the 4th largest city in North America. So the value of having the audience seal of approval on a movie like St. Vincent, that's a word of mouth, more accessible comedy, made us decide to give the world premiere to Toronto. That, and they agreed to give us Bill Murray Day in Toronto and play 4 or 5 of his films throughout the day up until the premiere. So the short answer is that it's sort of, the verdict's still out. A film like Birdman that we were just talking about that you should go see, after you've seen The Imitation Game at St. Vincent, is a film that premiered in Telluride. It premiered in Venice, then in Telluride, skipped Toronto, and is played the New York Film Festival. So it's all, I think the only thing it did was it really shook up the norm, which was you play Telluride, then Toronto, and then you're off to the races. Now you're a bit more strategic.
When he says that, Birdman did this, and I mean, the Fox Searchlight, every single company has a different way of doing it. Not just this, but in everything.
Right.
So when I deal with Weinstein or Fox Searchlight or Sony Classics, everyone is different. And that's a prime example. It's just a microcosm of what happens.
And that film festival, silliness of the film festival etiquette, which like for something like Telluride in Toronto might have a big money translation, but it even cascades down to like the level of where there's been some films that have played like at the on location Memphis Film Festival a week before the Nashville Film Festival,
Right.
But Nashville is having the Tennessee premiere of the film, and
Right.
then Memphis can't call it the Tennessee premiere because they already worked out a deal that Nashville gets to have the Tennessee premiere. I mean, who cares?
I do the
But
same
they
thing.
do it,
Mill Valley, Napa, and Sonoma all try to get the North Californian premiere of a film or something, and yet the politics are kind of insane about it. But
Well, thanks a lot, y'all,
Yeah,
for
thank you.
coming.
Thank you.
Thanks to you guys.